Did you know that some of the largest and most powerful buildings in the Bible were more than just structures? They were symbols of faith, power, and divine connection. But which one stands out as the greatest of them all? Let's take a journey through time to uncover the mightiest buildings mentioned in the Bible. Stay tuned for the next part to find the answer. Architecture has always been a powerful symbol of human achievement. But in the Bible, buildings weren't just made of stone or wood. They were made to connect heaven and earth. They were made to reflect divine will and to stand as monuments of faith. From towering temples to grand palaces, the buildings of the Bible weren't simply places of shelter. They were places where the sacred met the physical world, shaping cultures and faith traditions for generations. Each structure carried within it a sacred purpose, a firm belief in the power of faith. These structures were not just shelters for humanity. They were the intersection of worlds. They were architectural masterpieces reflecting the connection between humanity and the divine. Though these structures may fall, the meaning and faith they carried will last forever. Buildings are not just physical. They are symbols of faith and the enduring spirit of community. Let's start with the famous Temple of Solomon, known as the First Temple. This grand structure wasn't just the largest building in ancient Israel. It was the very center of Jewish life, a sacred space where God's presence was believed to dwell. Built with the finest materials, it took 7 years to complete and was a stunning masterpiece of ancient engineering. The temple wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of God's covenant with Israel. Then we moved to the Tower of Babel. Though not a temple or a palace, the Tower of Babel is significant for its ambition. It was an attempt by humanity to build a tower that reached the heavens, symbolizing pride and the desire to be like God. But God, seeing the pride of mankind, caused their languages to scatter, and the project was abandoned. The Tower of Babel serves as a reminder of human pride and divine intervention. Another remarkable building is Herod's Temple, also known as the Second Temple. Though it was rebuilt centuries later after the destruction of Solomon's Temple, it was even more magnificent. Herod the Great, known for his architectural projects, expanded and embellished the temple to make it a symbol of power and religious devotion, continuing the legacy of Solomon's vision. The temple wasn't just a physical structure, but a sacred symbol of the connection between humanity and God. Each wall, each pillar of Herod's temple reflected not only the power of an empire, but also the reverence and faith of its people. For each believer, the temple was the holiest place on earth, a place where they could feel God's presence with every step they took. Yet, just like Solomon's temple, Herod's temple couldn't escape its fate, destroyed in the suffering of history. But through the ruins, a great message is sent. Every great structure, no matter how magnificent, can be destroyed. After the destruction, people rise again, rebuild their structures. But within each person, there remains an indestructible faith. When the temple was destroyed, it wasn't just the walls that needed rebuilding, but the faith of the people had to be restored. Even without the great temple, the people didn't abandon their faith. They found God's presence in every moment of life. In the end, though temples may be destroyed, the love and faithfulness to God remains unchanged forever. For each heart is a temple of God, and every person carries within themselves holiness and faith. It is in the darkest of nights that God's light will always guide the way. No destruction can ever obscure it. Faith is not only built in temples, but also in every act of love and sharing between people. Each new temple is a symbol of resurrection and hope, a testament to perseverance and unwavering faith. Though great structures may collapse, the faith in each person's heart will always remain eternal. For this truth, God is always with us in every step through every trial. And the ultimate temple is the steadfast faith in God. But the most powerful and significant of all these structures might be the Tabernacle. Although not as physically grand as the Temple of Solomon or Herod's Temple, the Tabernacle played a central role in biblical history. It was the first sacred dwelling for the Israelites, a portable sanctuary that traveled with them through the desert after their exodus from Egypt. The tabernacle was considered the dwelling place of God on earth, And it was here that the Israelites would experience God's presence in a direct and powerful way. What makes the tabernacle stand out is that it represented the connection between the divine and the human. Unlike other structures, it wasn't about size or grandeur. It was about intimacy with God. The Ark of the Covenant, kept inside the tabernacle, was believed to house God's very presence, making it the most sacred object in all of Israel. The holiness of the tabernacle was a testament to the strong connection between humanity and God. It was the place where people could draw near to God in the most intimate way. But it was at the tabernacle that the Israelites did not just find a place of worship. They found a meeting place where God's presence was near, clear, and real. With the Ark of the Covenant, the Israelites believed that God's presence was truly there, in the cloud of glory, in the mysterious light. In every ritual, the tabernacle was the place where the Israelites offered their sacrifices, their prayers, drawing nearer to God. Right there, in the dark desert, the tabernacle was the light that guided the Israelites, a testament to God's presence among them. So, even without a mighty kingdom or a grand temple, at the tabernacle, the Israelites found protection, shelter, and divine strength. The tabernacle was not just a place of worship. It was a sign of God's companionship, a symbol of the unbreakable bond between God and His people. Wherever they went, the Israelites found comfort in the fact that God was with them. It was His presence that gave them strength. The tabernacle was a reminder for all of us of God's closeness and unconditional love. It was a mobile home, a proof that God is always with His people. Though the tabernacle was not a grand temple, it carried an unshakable power, the power of God's divine presence. The tabernacle was not only God's dwelling place, but also a place where humans found salvation, guidance, and God's protection. Looking at the tabernacle, the Israelites didn't just see a structure. They saw hope, life, and the certainty that God was always with them. The tabernacle was God's living presence among His people, a clear sign of His unconditional love and protection. God's presence in the tabernacle was a guarantee of peace and hope. The Israelites knew they were never alone. Even in the toughest times, when facing enemies and trials, the tabernacle was always a place of divine protection. When they set up the tabernacle, the Israelites were not just building a place of worship. They were building an eternal connection with God. The tabernacle was a sign of God's eternal presence, no matter where they were. No matter the circumstances, God was always near. With God's presence in the tabernacle, the Israelites felt protected, at peace, and embraced by God's eternal love. The tabernacle was an essential part of the Israelites' faith journey. It was not just a structure, but a symbol of faith and protection. And it was the Ark of the Covenant, where God made His covenant with His people, where His holiness and power were most evident. With every step, the Israelites felt God's presence, and the tabernacle was the place where they always found hope and strength. As time went on, the Temple of Solomon was destroyed, and the tabernacle's role was eventually replaced by the permanent temples in Jerusalem. Yet, after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, Jewish worship no longer depended on the physical structure, but instead focused on prayer and study. It was then that people realized that the temple was not just a stone structure, but a place where the spiritual meets, where humanity connects with God. In Christianity, the focus shifted to the idea that the body itself is now the temple of God, a sacred sanctuary not made of stone, but of purity in the soul. This shift marked a turning point in how sacred spaces were viewed, where faith was no longer confined to physical walls, but resided in the hearts of individuals. For centuries, these events shaped the way people viewed sacred spaces. Buildings became less about the size or the power they represented, and more about their symbolic meaning. Temples now are not just great structures, but symbols of faith and connection between humanity and the Creator. Sacredness is not only in grand structures, but in every ordinary moment, in every act of love and sharing between people. Therefore, the ultimate temple is not a building, but a heart full of faith, a soul always directed toward God. Every sacred space, whether a church or a soul, can be a place where love and faith converge, And that is the ultimate meaning of a temple. And in these peaceful moments, we realize that the ultimate temple is the everlasting faith within each of us. Today, sacred space is no longer confined to architectural structures, but can exist anywhere in the hearts of individuals. This shows the shift in religion, where sacred space is no longer a place of division, but a place that connects people of all faiths in love and peace. In other religions, sacred space is also understood in a broader sense, not just as a place of worship, but as a space for quiet reflection and contemplation. Just as in Islam, worship becomes a sacred space within each person's soul, where they connect with the divine through acts of prayer. Sacred space is not just where we seek peace, but where we find unity and love among humanity. Understanding and mutual respect are the keys to building sacred spaces in each person's soul. Regardless of religion or temple, creative artists, with their ability to convey the meaning of sacred spaces through their works, help us broaden our understanding of what constitutes a temple. Even in a modern world, sacred space still exists, not through physical structures, but through the connections within each person's heart. In the end, we realize that sacredness is not found in buildings, but in the love and connection between people. Each of us is part of an invisible network, where each heart is a living temple, where we feel the presence of the divine. In simple communities like this, we find sacredness in the acts of love and helping one another. The family, where all spiritual values begin, is an eternal temple, where love is continuously given. In this ever-changing world, finding a place to worship and connect is truly precious. All of us, no matter what faith, can build sacred spaces where all differences are embraced. And that is the mission of each of us, not to build physical structures, but to build sacred spaces within each other's hearts. So, what lessons do we take away from the largest buildings in the Bible? First, we learn that architecture isn't just about size. It's about purpose and connection to the divine. Whether it's the grandeur of Solomon's temple or the humility of the Tabernacle, each structure teaches us that true power lies not in physical might, but in spiritual devotion. These buildings remind us that faith, prayer, and devotion to God are what truly make a structure sacred. In today's world, as we build our own temples of faith, we can reflect on the lessons from the past. It's not the size of the building that matters, it's the spirit within it that counts. Every temple, big or small, can contain God's presence when people seek Him with sincere hearts. These buildings are not just physical structures, but symbols of the spiritual connection that people find in God. No matter where we are, every place of worship is where we can feel God's presence. The most important thing is not the physical structure, but the spirit and faith we have in God. Every temple carries within it sacredness when people seek a connection with God. Our lesson is that our connection with God is not through physical structures, but through sincerity and faith. And so, each of us can build a temple within our hearts where God is always present. Remember, wherever we are, God is with us, and where there is faith, there is sacredness. God's presence is the most important thing, and all structures are merely a reflection of our faith. Just like the tabernacle, the temple within our hearts becomes sacred when we allow God to live there. Therefore, every place we pray is a temple, and every moment we worship is a connection with God. We don't need grand buildings because within our hearts, God's holiness already dwells. Holiness does not come from physical structures, but from our hearts, where faith and love for God dwell. Let our hearts become a holy temple, where God's presence always dwells. Every day, we can worship God in the temple of our hearts. The temple is truly where we feel God's closeness and presence. From the holy temples in the Bible to modern temples, the lesson remains the same. The connection with God is what matters most. Thus, the temples we build in our lives are the places where we seek peace and holiness. Every temple contains the boundless power of God, and sincere worship is the key to unlocking that holiness. We don't need grand physical structures to find holiness, but only hearts and sincere faith. Let us build temples within our hearts together, where God's presence always dwells. What do you think? Which of these monumental structures stands out to you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey through biblical history, make sure to check out our other videos where we dive deeper into the symbolism of sacred architecture. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content like this. Thank you for watching. See you in the next videos.